guys, it's Nicole. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I want to share how I stay on top of watering my plant collection. So I have a large collection of about 200 different orchids and Hoyas. It's a pretty substantial collection that I keep here in a spare bedroom in my apartment. And one of the most challenging parts of taking care of a collection this large is staying on top of watering. So I want to share what I've learned through the years. What's worked for me, what hasn't worked, and just talk to you a bit about some of the challenges as well. So one of the biggest things is should I water on a schedule? And I find that watering on a schedule isn't always the best. I used to water on a schedule, but then I'd find that some plants needed more water than others. So I try not to water on a schedule, but I do dedicate about 3 to 4 different days a week where I come in and check on the collection and water anything that needs it. With that said, I only dedicate 1 day per week on thoroughly watering everything and then going in and taking care of my other orchids more frequently. So the most important orchids for me are the ones that are mounted. I only have one, and this one unfortunately needs to be watered every day. I have it on the radiator, and don't worry, I never turn the radiator on in this room. It's pretty warm on its own, but anything mounted needs a lot more love and care. And then I have orchids in very large pots, and I used to set things up in semi-hydro. And the reason for this is that it's an always moist system. So as long as it has water in the pot, I don't need to do anything. So this is some of the easiest kinds of orchids to grow. This kind of setup is actually really good because you could just top the water off and forget it. But then when you're dealing with other orchids, say like an organic mix, they have wet dry cycles, so you have to pay a little bit more attention. But anything in like a bigger pot, anything that's say more than 5 inches, 6 inches, 7 inches, those are a little bit less high maintenance, especially if they're not, even if they're not in semi-hydro. So I keep these on bottom shelves so they don't get watered as frequently. I find it pretty helpful to group your plants into the different sizes of the pot. So semi-hydro is the lowest maintenance, and then organic larger pots are also lower maintenance, especially cattleyas. They could stay drier longer. But I try to put them together because these don't need to get watered as much, and I have them in the back of my shelves too. So these are 5.5-inch pots. I have moss and bark in them. Generally watering these every 5 days or so. When they get dry is generally fine, but then anything in like a clay pot or anything that's smaller, I tend to put in the front because these dry a lot faster. They wick water out of the pot, so they dry a lot faster, so they have to be watered more frequently. Anything in like a ceramic pot as well, like this orchid pot here where I have my Vanda, this needs to be watered more often. So although I water my collection once a week very thoroughly, 3 to 4 times a week, I have to go in and check anything that's dried up, that needs more moisture. I have to top that off. So I put a lot of effort into the collection once a week on the weekend. And then during the week, I pop in and then I top anything off that I feel like needs a little bit more moisture. And a lot of that are the clay pots or anything that's in airier mixes. Some of the orchids that I have that definitely need way more TLC are my Vandas. So these really need a lot of moisture. And they need to dry quick, so they're in moss and clay pots, but they dry really, really fast because the pots are pretty small. So I come in here pretty often and top these off every 2 days or so. If I go on vacation or something, they'll just have to deal and they'll be okay. I have these semi-hydro plants as well. I'm moving out of this setup, but these dry up pretty fast, so I have to top these off about twice a week. I just watch and see what I need to do. These clay pots are a little bit bigger aside for the dendrobium in the front, but these don't need water as frequently. So like once or twice a week is fine, but my Maxillaria tenifolias need way more frequent watering. So I suggest grouping your plants into sections. So when you check them out, you can just water them as they need it. Although I've moved away from semi-hydro, I find the self-watering pots the easiest for water because you just literally just need to top it off and it can last for like 2 weeks. So a lot of my Hoyas, I'll just water them once a week because they don't really need it that much. But anything in like a potting mix, I water them as they dry. Now, I really have to pay attention to my seedlings because these can decline the most. So When I'm checking my collection every few days, these are the ones that really get more TLC. And unfortunately, my cat bit that new growth off. She's kind of annoying. And that plant right there is dying a little bit because it didn't get as much moisture as it needed. But anything that's smaller needs a lot more TLC. Anything that's in just bark without moss, it really depends on how you potted your orchid up. But I really suggest grouping your plants into different categories so that when you're watering, like I said, you can't really water on a schedule because some pots are going to stay moist and some are going to be dry. So you kind of have to know which part of your collection needs it. Now, something I do a lot if I just don't have the time to water is I mist my pots with an electric sprayer. And sometimes I mist to increase the humidity. I don't do it every single day, but I try to. But if I can't water, my vandas are most important and most sensitive. I'll mist the tops of the pots. It's not a replacement to water, but if I don't have the time, it gives them a little bit more humidity. So I find this pretty helpful when I'm running short on time. Anything that doesn't really need water, I try to keep it kind of out of sight, out of mind. So like my catasetums, you'll notice they're not here on the main parts of my shelves. I keep them at the very top of the shelves. So I have some divisions up there that I do water, but those catasetums are still dormant. And then when they start pushing their new growths, then I move it down where it's more easy to water them. So ideally once a month I should flush the collection. It really doesn't happen as often. Sometimes every 2 or 3 months I'm able to flush the collection, and I bring everything over to my sink, flush everything in the sink, and then bring it back. And then I divide that task with all these plants in a week. So it takes me quite a long time, but in between I use a watering can or a pump sprayer to water everything. My next video, I'll show you how I water everything. I wanted to show you guys my approach as to how I water my collection because I find that bringing everything to the sink is very unrealistic if you have a very large collection. So something that'll save you here are catch pots or shelf liners help a ton, and you'll notice I have little saucers under every single pot. So watering right on the shelves saves a ton of time. Anyway, guys, in the next video, I'll show you exactly how I water the collection, how I fertilize everything, and how I flush everything. I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.